Yeah, it's not too bad. Okay, it is 6:30. I'm going to turn the screen share off on this. Nobody wants to look at me anymore. There we go. So it's 6:30. I'd like to welcome everyone to our June 2022 El Dorado Hills Area Planning Advisory Committee meeting. I'm the chair, John Davey. Vice Chair John Rensselaer is to my left. Tim White, Vice Chair, is on the end. Looking to see if Brooke's in yet. Our Secretary, Brooke Washburn, is not in yet, but she might be busy with Little League still. So I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. We're hoping to have a short meeting. We don't have a lot of items. It's sort of informational to update people about what's going on with APAC and what's been going on a little bit up at the county in terms of how it's impacting development in El Dorado Hills or projects. So with that, I'm going to get back to this silly thing. And there it is. Sorry. I think that's it. Sorry. And ta-da. Okay, moving right along. So we begin the meeting, we call the meeting in order. The adoption of the meeting agenda, if there are no objections here tonight.
None.
That's easy. These are the best meetings ever. And then, so when we begin our meetings, we like to have an opportunity for public comment about items that are not on the agenda. We have a very narrow agenda tonight. It's informational, like I said. We have one project we're going to talk a little bit about at the end. So if there's any public comments about anything that's not on the agenda, we have microphones throughout the room. You can pick it up, push the button, turns green, jibber jabber to your heart's content. Is there anybody in the room that has a public comment tonight? We might get home really early. So then I'll turn it over to our Zoom attendees. If you're a Zoom attendee, you can press the raise hand button. And if I see that, I'll unmute you and call on you to make a comment. Seeing none. All right, let's move forward.
John?
Yeah. No, you have a public comment. And do you have a microphone? Okay, good deal.
Yes, I do. I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention that Tony Mansour passed away last week. Tony was the developer and architect of Town Center. And anytime APAC ever went up to see him, he was always a gentleman and probably gave us too much information. So I just want to bring that to everybody's attention.
Yeah, and Tony had a big vision for El Dorado Hills, both what developed here with Serrano, when they got those approvals, and then they sold to Park Development, and then in Town Center. And I know that that business is continuing to do things for El Dorado Hills that are significant. Mine's muted? Okay. Hey, John, you can go live whenever you want. Can you hear me? Let me check this again. Hey, John, can you hear me now? This must be a good meeting because nobody wants to hear me. Let's see.
This is Chrissy. I can hear you just fine if you're
Okay.
talking about over Zoom. I could hear you before and I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, frequently my kids and my wife don't hear me, so that's okay. John, can you hear us? Well, I'm going to keep going. There will be a recording, and if there's no words, this is all for naught. It'll just be for the group here tonight. Wow, this is fortuitous timing, because the next item on our agenda, supervisor communications, and there's a microphone waiting for you, John.
Very good. That's a good time. All right. There we go. All right, so I think that's working. So I'm gonna be brief this evening because I know we're all tired from the election night last night, right? Everybody stayed up till midnight to find out if their candidate won or not, and all that good stuff. But all that aside, there's just two things I want to make you aware of. The Board of Supervisors held their budget hearing on Tuesday, and the good news is there was $17 million of excess revenues that came to the county beyond what we anticipated. And some of that's because we were very cautious in anticipating what kind of ARPA funds we might receive, and some of that's reimbursable to county departments for services, et cetera, et cetera. So we ended basically the fiscal year in a very good situation. And as a result of that, we were able to identify $4 million of additional monies that we could take from the general fund and put into road maintenance. Last year, we had $3 million that we supplemented the road maintenance fund, which is supposed to be totally paid for by state gas taxes. The way it's supposed to work, the state collects them, they send them to counties and the cities, and that pays for the maintenance. Well, the money we're collecting is not sufficient to pay for the maintenance, so we're supplementing that. But basically, we're able to more than double the road maintenance for this 1 year at least. So I think that's a step in the right direction. There were a number of other things that came out of the budget hearing. Our final numbers won't be adjusted until our September meeting. And we're anticipating by the time we close the books and look at the numbers again, that we will find that there's like some excess revenue in addition to what we saw here in the June timeframe. And that will allow us then to consider expending additional funds in areas such as the El Dorado Hills Fire Department. I guess we don't have one of the chiefs here, right?
You just missed them.
They made a request for a boat to go out and service rescue and recovery services out in Folsom Lake. The Board of Supervisors wasn't able to fund that initial round, but there's a chance here in September, if we do see the additional funds that I think they're there, to provide the fire district that funding to do that. So I know Tim's very involved with that, serving on the fire board. So that's the good news part of the budget. The second thing I think everybody knows is tomorrow is the Planning Commission hearing on Central El Dorado Hills. And I've had several communications with our planning commissioner, John Vania, today about stuff he's going over and some of his discoveries and things that he's looking at. But I can guarantee you, at least in our district, our planning commissioners put a ton of time into looking at all this, reading through the APAC letter, which was well constructed. It was lengthy and somewhat repetitious, but I understand when you're building it, in pieces and stuff, and it takes that long to do it. And then there's been other submittals. The El Dorado Hills Community Services District submitted a letter of demand. I think some of us attended the CSD special meeting and heard of that. The county received that this morning. I got notification of about 10 a.m. So
Posted like at 4.
right. So posted on Legistar at 4 o'clock. So clearly the CSD has made their comments relative to the project and the things that they're looking to get out of it. So the stage is set for a very lively discussion tomorrow. Starting, it's at 8:30. It starts. The Planning Commission hearing, 8:30. And I'm guessing they're going to be there all day because we still have public comment period open. So they will open the meeting and do some administrative things and then move right to accepting any additional public comment that people want to add beyond what was in the previous meeting that was presented. So they've encouraged people to submit letters, and I've seen several letters come across my desk, several emails of people submitting their information and stuff. But if you want to appear and testify before the commission with specific information, I think they may end up limiting the time depending upon how many people are there to a very short statement. But if you feel strong enough about it, you want to be present and to make your statement, you will have that opportunity very shortly after 8:30 tomorrow morning at the Planning Commission hearing room. So
I'm uncertain on the sequence. I know that they've allowed for, I think, about 15 minutes for another presentation by the applicant, by staff.
Right.
40 of the comment will be with public, and then they have to deliberate.
Right. So, and it's also available on Zoom. So if you don't want to drive to the county offices, you can participate via Zoom and make your comment there as well, or just listen in if you'd like to. So that's the second big thing that's happening. And I think I'll end there unless anybody has any questions. So.
Any questions for Supervisor Heidel? In the room? Wow. And then I'll turn it over to Zoom. Is there anybody on Zoom? You want to hit the raise hand? I'm watching. I don't see a hand going up. Assuming they can hear me. I don't see a hand up. So we look good there. I did want to mention, I neglected when you had mentioned that about Mr. Mansour passing. There was one thing, I had an email and a couple calls today. A lot of people have been asking about some construction going on Appian Way across from the San Giovese Gate. And that is a Serrano. It's a village, what is it? It's M5. It's 10 parcels on 8 acres. And I know some people were looking for the grading permit. It's not in Trackit, and they called the county and DOT and planning cannot find a grading permit for it, but it was also approved in 2001. So it's just the further built out of the 1988 El Dorado Hills specific plan, and that specific tentative map was approved in 2000, or it was tentative map 2001. It was probably approved right after that. So if there are any questions about that, call the planning department. Okay, moving along. The next thing that we're going to jump into tonight, I'm going to switch back over here. Sorry, gang. If I can find what I'm looking for. Too many screens. And there we go. Okay, so let me throw this stuff up on the screen and we'll get going with this. Okay, so we don't have a guest speaker tonight. We're going to move right into our projects, and they're primarily updates. And maybe John, we can query John on this because I've probably forgotten everything I remembered about this when I was making the agenda last week. We've been a little busy. So at the May 10th Board of Supervisors hearing, they had a joint workshop with the Planning Commission regarding developing an affordable housing ordinance. So the way it was described is it was a joint workshop to get input, direction from the board and the Planning Commission, and get public feedback for the process of developing the affordable housing ordinance, which we technically don't have in place right now. Okay, jumping too many screens. So the direction from that discussion, from that workshop, I'll just go through real quick. They want to look at the surplus of other county lands for the inventory list for possible affordable housing locations. We have sort of a small list now. In Placerville, they just leased, I believe, the Armory, the city of Placerville, that's city property. They lease the Armory, and it's state, yeah, okay. It's city. So I want to say it's 86 affordable housing units they're going to put there. And if you don't know where that is, it's just above the fairgrounds on Ray Lawyer Drive. And so that was announced, I want to say it was last week, the end of last week. So they also talked about the utilization of tiny homes for residential use. And in Sacramento today, they announced that they did approve a project on Florin Road. It used to be a commercial area where car dealerships used to be, and right next to the old Florin Mall. But I think they're doing 100 tiny homes in there. It was a thing that had been sort of denied and moved back. And so these are items that you'll be hearing about, not just in El Dorado County, but statewide. But here, that was one thing that they looked at. There's some things in here as, so an inclusionary zoning policy, which means, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, because you sat through the meeting, I listened to it on recording. Inclusionary zoning is essentially allocating a segment of project development towards affordable or more affordable housing, and making that a requirement of, I want to say, all development projects or most development projects. There might be some limitations, but
I think it's development projects over 10 units is the criteria. We don't have the ordinance yet, but that's
Yeah, this is
typical what they do.
discussion. So
Right.
these are the directions that were given to staff. They're building a working group basically to go forward to bring this back. Residential overlay for mixed use on commercial lands, like Missouri Flat, the corridor there where they have a rather unique financing plan from sales tax there to build out the roads and infrastructure there for the Missouri Flat area. Zoning options for housing on new or existing mobile home parks. It's a conditional use permit now in residential areas. That mobile home parks are very viable for the senior community now. A lot of seniors are looking at mobile homes, and we don't have an abundance in El Dorado Hills, but in the county there are some, and so that comes with a lot of challenges because typically they own the building, they don't own the land, and so they're subject to rent increases like you would if you were renting. So
It's a space rent
yeah,
situation. They own the mobile home, but they don't own the property that surrounds
yeah, and it's not an easy thing to move a mobile home. Even though it's mobile, it's still something of a big deal. And then this one was, I couldn't get my head around this. I mean, I understood what the discussion was, but designate the Missouri Flat Corridor as a green zone to possible grant funding projects that are being piloted by SACOG And I know the auditor controller had some input on that. He didn't want to, he had a negative view of that suggestion of making that more a mixed use with the affordable housing, because the way the Missouri Flat corridor was, the Missouri Flat was built out was, the intention was with that special financing district to improve roads and infrastructure. The auditor controller felt that, hey, that might have an impact, you know, is that a compatible use? Well, when you think about it, the road's already sort of improved there. It's adjacent to the highway, adjacent to other, you know, some public transit, and there's some potential there, right? So that's one thing that they're going to examine. And then the last item was consider a housing trust fund. And boy, funds are tough for just the normal things that we always do and we're aware of. Another funding item is going to be difficult. So those are the few of the things that they talked about.
It's a land bank type of approach.
Yeah, so.
Bill Roby at El Dorado Community Foundation has a lot of history with those things, so they are doable.
Yeah, but is it doable here was my question. I mean, I heard the discussion, you know, development here is a little different than
Yep.
you know, major metropolitan areas or more developed areas.
I think they're doable within El Dorado County. I'm not sure they're doable within El Dorado Hills. So
I was
it's
questioning
the
even about El Dorado
criteria.
County. I was like, oh, the rural nature of that is kind of. So did I miss anything there? Because that was just what the staff was directed to.
Those were probably the highlights. There was a lot of discussion. The inclusionary housing is something a lot of other counties and cities has done. And typically what it says is that the developer has 10 units or more they're developing, that 10%, it can be 15, it can be 20, but typically 10% is a lower threshold. 10% of those homes that are built or apartment complexes have to be affordable to people at median income, or in this case, 80% of median income for what the county is. And what they do is they do a deed restriction on the property so that the person who is, if you're buying that home, you don't get the equity growth you would get out of a normal purchase because it's deed restricted. And I'm not sure what, if any percentage you basically get, but it's subsidizing your housing. And if you turned around and sold it to somebody else, you're going to get a very small equity growth as opposed to the normal market rate housing that you would purchase. So there's ways that they can do that, but the developer basically has to come forward and provide the funds to do that initially. And that becomes a significant analysis in terms of where the balancing point is, what kind of densities you need to do to make it affordable from that perspective, doable from the developer's perspective. There's a lot of pluses and minuses. And again, it's hard to do in some areas as opposed to other areas. But it's something we need to consider. Placer County passed their inclusionary housing ordinance, I think it was like 5 years ago. So it's not like we're doing this on our own without some understanding of what other people have done. And I think we look at the counties adjacent to us and find out what their history has been, and then see if there's something that we can get behind in terms of the terms of that affordable housing provision.
Where we can
Inclusionary housing.
avoid some challenges. Maybe somebody else has figured it out. There's a better way to implement it, but yeah. So some sort of dynamic ideas to solve a problem that's probably just going to continue to grow.
Alistair could probably get us a whole dissertation on it, but we don't want to take the time tonight, right? So
but we would be well informed. So
maybe at a future time if it gets closer, who knows?
well, and you know, we'll come back to this. After that presentation, I had reached out to CJ Freeland and said, hey, it's too early, right, to have anybody come from the county to discuss this. I just want people to be aware. Yep. And yeah, it's too early. And then I've got more from CJ later here tonight, so we'll get to that. So I'm sorry, were there any questions about that? Any questions that I can't answer? Sorry, I just watched the meeting. I didn't participate. So, and no hands going up on Zoom.
I will say though, the state did approve our arena.
Yeah,
Submittal and stuff, the housing element. So we got all, and includes
yeah.
affordable housing amongst a lot of other things. So that was a huge success that we didn't have to recycle that multiple times.
Yeah, so that was a long process to go through. And so, in fact, I got an email from CJ about that. And it could work. That was a project to get through. So the next item on our agenda tonight, at the Board of Supervisors, and this is just informational in that the board approved and adopted this resolution for the El Dorado Hills Interchange Improvement, Phase 2B, or not to be. And it's a capital improvement program. So the intent of this board action was to go with some staff recommendations about how the project will be organized and who has responsibilities, because it's the interchange is involved, so Caltrans and the state's involved. Establishing things like who's obtaining right of way, who's managing different elements of the project, the funding and all that. So I'm trying to remember if I even included that. It's just more informational. So we'll move ahead. So obviously it's El Dorado Hills Boulevard at the interchange, Latrobe to the south. This has been on the CIP for a long time. Our first phase of the interchange improvements before 2014, it had to be like 12 or 10.
It was in the 10 time frame.
Yeah. So right now, part of this is, I don't think I put it on. I just have this representational here. So there you go. So I can almost read this. Off ramps, on ramps, White's Latrobe, El Dorado Hills Boulevard. And I don't know if it's still designed to be coordinated with the auxiliary lanes, because the auxiliary lanes, I think, have moved, right, in terms of many years out. So, but it's just the coordination between the state and the county and how they're going to facilitate this and how it's going to get paid for, how the right-of-ways are going to be obtained. So when we look at this, the funding numbers are all way out in future years. Of course, I have all this in front of me right here, so I can't see it. I'm not wearing my spectacles, but we're talking. Is it 12 million? I'll turn around and look at it. How's that? So $12.6 million total for the project projected now. Sorry, my microphone's here. Those numbers will be different in that time frame. Those numbers, what's inflation right now? But I did see something from DOT that said that it was more imminent than the CIP is suggesting right now in terms of what the state's talking about.
The state is looking to get more infrastructure monies, and if that
Yeah,
happens, the
so it
county
could
has
be-
some share portion, basically the state contributes, so.
I want to say that the document I thought I saw said it might have been, 26 to 27 through 3031 is when we're talking about beginning things again in terms of this project. It's a ways out, but I think the DOT had suggested that that's probably more real with that earlier number than the 3031. So, more construction, but going northbound on El Dorado Hills Boulevard underneath the highway, instead of the 2 turn lanes and the 1 straight, it'll be 2 turn lanes, I think three northbound lanes. So it should be an improvement in getting traffic and through that intersection, because right now it's gosh darn awful. I know that I want to say at the last community council meeting, it was in person. I had stopped in the shopping center there, and I came out and I thought, well, how long will it take me to get to Saratoga? Our meeting was at 5, so it was probably at 4 something. And I turned out of the shopping center and I immediately stopped. My window was even with the Starbucks drive-through. So that gets backed up just on that side of the interchange. So there'll be improvements to we need to get that massive traffic through there. So this is coming. We'll all endure the construction. It's a lot of money, but there's a plan in place, and it'll be here soon-ish. So if there's any questions on that, we can talk about it, but it's just been a plan for.
John, any bike and, what are they doing for bike and pedestrian?
Oh, hold on. As I'm studying this, I don't see it in the CIP. I thought I had heard. Why do you put me on the spot? Well, that was a question I think that we had in terms of the central project when we talked about the pedestrian overpass. We thought, well, that's probably $25 million. But can't we go? There's a sidewalk there now. Can't we do something? But I'm blanking on what it is. So informative, but not completely informative. Sorry. If anybody has any information or anybody online wants to chime in, please do.
Line item.
Not in the CIP document. This is a basic document. You really have to look at the plans that that DOT has in place, and these is just what's publicly available in the capital improvement program that's posted online. But we can ask. Raphael's always accommodating in terms of how they respond to our requests for presentations or updates on projects. So it might be a good one. I know the summer's tough because people like to do their vacations, but if we can get somebody, they can do it virtually. We'll have them like we've done before. So, but that's thanks for reminding me. That's a follow-up for me. So, if there are no questions about that one, I don't see any online either. So we'll jump ahead. So the next one was this is just you know, we talk a lot about staff and how we get responses and how they help us, and we try to provide input to them in terms of the planning department and the Department of Transportation. And just posted, I don't want to say it was 2 weeks ago, but it's closing now. The county is looking to hire 5 senior planners. That's a lot of planners. So they have been short-staffed. And when we talk about things like, and I'll talk about now, you know, we submitted our documents last week for this project we'll talk about next. Typically, we submit a document, we get a response within the end of the day. We submitted it late in the day, so I assume we get a response the next morning. We have received your comments, but we didn't get them on the next day, and we didn't get them at the end of the next day, and we got responses from supervisors' offices, but so our staff is working hard, and you might think, oh, you know, they're planning. You know, it's, you know, they're working. They're residents here like us, and so they're looking to get help. So 5 senior planning positions are up, and as part of that, I wanted to note that so it's some information about the positions. The closing period is today. So if you're going to apply, I'm sorry. If they don't get enough good applicants, maybe you can apply if they open it back up. But I did want to mention this. So we have a few people leaving the county employment, and they're sort of people of note in terms of what we've had responses from the county and who have helped us over the years. Natalie Porter, Department of Transportation. Natalie was here at a meeting not too long ago, which was very generous of her because it was at night and it was, you know, after a long day at work. So Natalie's a traffic engineer in the Department of Transportation, and Natalie did retire, and so I think that's a loss for us here in our community. You know, she lived here, but also because of what she provided in terms of information and experience. Now, we always have trouble with transportation elements of almost every project, but Natalie was always willing to talk to us about it and say, well, this is why, and here are the standards, just like when Raphael talks to us. So, and then CJ, who I talked with quite a bit, CJ is also leaving the long range planning department, and CJ really knows our housing element. I mean, really knows our housing element. And I'm glad she does it because I would probably pull what's left of my hair out trying to deal with that. But it's something that they, you know, have to update in terms of the element of the general plan. They have to update it every 8 years, if I'm remembering correctly. Housing element. I think that's 8 years. 21 to 29. Yeah. Oh. I think it's 21, 29, right? It's 8 years.
8 years and 5 years.
I think it's 8. But it takes a long time. And so CJ was always generous with her time too. When she would, I think she's been here in person. She's zoomed in when we couldn't do it, and we had to do it virtually. So when I asked CJ, hey, is it too soon to talk about, you know, we talked about the affordable housing element, the ordinance. She goes, yeah, it's too soon, and I won't be able to talk about it after July. So I was a little disappointing, but good for her. Congratulations for her. She provided a lot of service, as did Natalie, to our residents. So when we talk about planning and how they respond to us, we have to keep in mind too, you know, the residents here and they're working hard and they're understaffed. So
if you haven't heard, Adam Bain is taking Natalie's position.
I hadn't
He
heard
stepped
that
into that.
officially, and Adam's been here as well.
Right,
Adam's
and he's
there.
been with DOT for a long time, so I
Yes.
think you're going to find the same kind of responsiveness from Adam. CJ's position, they had somebody that they interviewed was ideal for the situation, and then they made the offer and got a comment back, well, I got a family situation that came up, I'm not going to be able to accept the offer. And that's what's happening a lot. It's tough to find really good qualified people, and even when you get them to that offer stage.
Oh, and when we look at a county of our size, land-wise, we're very big. Population-wise, we're not. And it's a delicate balance to try to get good employees with experience. And, you know, what happens a lot is that we get a lot of newer employees that get experience here and then go on, you know, where they can leverage it. So it'd be nice to keep them around. So I just thought that was important because that's a couple of people that we have talked to many times, if not here at the meeting, then offline. And, you know, congratulations to them and thank them for their service here in the county and our community. So if nobody's applying, I'm going to move ahead. Okay, so what time is it? Wow, okay. So the Eldorado Hills, the Central Eldorado Hills specific plan we've been talking about this a lot for the last month and a half, I want to say, about right. And I know John is muted right now. I'm going to ask John to jump in if he has anything he wants to contribute. But I have a couple of just things that we're going to go through. So when we worked on this, we had a meeting on the 25th. I can't remember. We had a Zoom meeting for voting members of APAC. The public was invited as well. And essentially that was to sort of codify what our findings were from our subcommittee on the project. And so we did that, and then we just basically, once we voted to approve the findings of the subcommittee to be the official findings of APAC, we had to do some organization and some layout for the report. So it was a challenge because when we started this report, we had submitted a big report in 2020 in January before the last planning commission hearing at the district church. And it was a big report. And we thought, well, nothing's, as we've gone through this in this last sort of tranche of documents, nothing's changed substantively. There's been some minor changes with road alignment or some elements of the development agreement, the draft. So we thought, well, our findings are pretty narrow. It's going to say our findings are the same as they were before. Nothing's materially changed. However, when we started getting into it, once you touch one thing, you touch everything. And despite our desire to make this a very small, focused document, it ended up at 68 pages. We have 13 supporting exhibits, and even referencing our previous findings. And we had a cover letter that we put in, and I did the cover letter, and basically, the findings are the findings. They haven't changed. And I was disappointed because really, we have three things that we do when we review a project. We talk about whether we want to approve the project as presented in terms of we support it. We want to support it with conditional support where we want to ask for some changes to a project of some minor things or some major things. They can always say no. And a lot of times they do. But, or the final one is, we can't support the project. And we've had a couple that we've not supported in probably the last 6 to 7 years, not too many, I think maybe 3 total, including this one. And so to me, that's a failure. And it's not just a failure just because the applicant has a project we don't like. It's a failure that we're not able to convey our concerns in a fashion that's adequate so they understand or they're going to respond. If they want to look at it and say, hey, we just can't do it, but we're not getting that feedback this time. So it's a failure for us. The community's been talking. And honestly, I think it's a failure because the applicant and the planning staff aren't recognizing these concerns. We're sort of glossing them over. And so I'm disappointed when we have a finding of non-support. I just feel like, we probably have missed something. We missed an opportunity. So that was in my cover letter. John did a lot of work in terms of many elements of this, and we were all behind each other working on this, making improvements. Melinda's here tonight, Melinda Peake and John Burns, Robert Williams, who's here virtually. Alistair's here tonight. Brooke worked on this. Nancy worked on this like she did last time. So we had a lot of people working on this, and we just couldn't, I think in our previous document, we had made a recommendation. It's like, well, what if there was, instead of 15 acres for a park, what if there was, 40 acres? I think the CSD asked for 35. But there's never any substantive response, so that's anything that would be entertained. So we're disappointed by that. So then again, here's the nitty gritty of it. 68 pages of the main document, the cover letter, 12 exhibits. At our meeting for voting members, we had suggested, because we've been hearing from a lot of people, say, could we get a copy of the draft before you're done with it? Like, well, a lot of people asked, and we thought, okay, well, if somebody asks, we'll do it on request, but it's probably got to be a good reason why. And the week after our meeting, I got a message from Serrano Associates. They wanted a copy of our draft. Well, at the time, it was torn up because it was being rearranged to trying to find some consistency with how we're laying out the discussion. And also, I think the night I got the message, I was doing the sober grad night for high school graduation, and the next night was high school graduation, and then it was the holiday weekend. So I told them, hey, it's probably going to be Monday or Tuesday before we can even get to this. But and we just still struggled to finish up the document. I think we submitted it on Thursday, the 2nd. But before we submitted it to the planning department, I sent a copy to Parker Development. So they had it in hand before anybody in the community and before anybody at the planning department. And again, we had noticed that the documents weren't posted in Legistar. After we submitted it, we didn't get confirmation that they received it. I sent a second message in on Monday saying, hey, we didn't get this confirmation. And then I guess essentially was that they're so inundated with all these documents, they were taking them in tranches and putting them together and posting them at once. So it waited for a few days before it got posted. I also provided a copy of the CSD because they asked for it afterwards. I provided a copy to the county auditor because he had suggested he might be interested in that, just as a courtesy. So it's distributed everywhere. We have internal links in the document that allow even the planning commissioners who are reading it, if they're reading the version we sent in and not the one that was a photocopied PDF, the links will link to the actual different supporting exhibits, attachments. So all that's in there. It was a lot of work, and it was, like I said, I'm disappointed it wasn't a smaller document. I'm disappointed that our finding is what our finding is, but it is what it is. John, Richard, is there anything you'd like to contribute? We're at this point now that I think that enough of me, more someone else is better.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it, John. I think one of the biggest disappointments I have in this whole process is that it's not clear to me that the planning commissioners and ultimately the Board of Supervisors are getting an entirely clear picture of this project. And I say that meaning that, obviously all the information's in the documents. I'm not saying that the information isn't in the Central El Dorado Hills, specific plan documents, but that's thousands and thousands of pages. And I don't know that the planning commissioners can be expected to read with the level of detail that some of us have gone over. And we've tried to point out those areas in the APAC report. And, hopefully everyone will have a chance to take a look at that. But that's been my, a big disappointment of mine, is that I don't feel like the staff report provided a nice summary of really the details of the project.
And really that there were some conflicting elements that are in both like the original draft, the final, and what's verbally communicated during the hearing. The planning commission will ask, well, how many units total could be with the zoning consistent? Well, it's a big number. When we look in the draft environmental impact report, it's a significantly smaller number. So,
well, and what's interesting about that, John, also is that, Kirk Bone wrote a letter, the June 2nd letter, a supplement to his presentation for tomorrow, and he uses an entirely different number for what would be the zoning consistent build out.
Yeah, and so that's a concern because it's in the EIR from 2015, and it's the same number that's in the final EIR in 2022, but we're all talking around with different numbers. It could be this, it could be that. Well, zoning consistent is one, and then the way that it's, with slope and oak tree canopy, and the reality is it's a different number. So, and then there are elements that we were upset with in terms of how the documents came out when they came out before the hearing in May, or in April on the 28th. There was a exhibit showing part of the development agreement didn't come out till I think 2 days before the hearing. So, but then there was an exhibit added during the hearing after they mentioned the exhibit and was put into Legistar, and that was the option for the CSD to have 11 acres right behind us right here for a small golf course. But there was discussion of it in the draft 2 days before the hearing. There was no supporting documentation, and as they're talking about it, they pulled it out of a folder, they got it scanned in, and then it was in Legistar by the end of the meeting. But that doesn't provide any opportunity for you or I to provide a thoughtful response, or it's an opportunity. Maybe that's something we go, hey, there's something we could like hold on to that might be this could get us someplace, but that wasn't there. And then the same thing too is that we were going through it again as I was so tired of reading this. As I was going through looking at the draft development agreement, they had 13 exhibits listed, and I know I had looked at exhibits in the previous draft and I didn't look at them as closely this time because they looked like they were named the same. But when I went to go find the exhibits, they weren't there. And this is from April. And we're in June. And so I checked the planning department and they didn't get a response. And then I called our planning commissioner and asked him if he had a copy he could provide us. He did not have it either. It was attached today at 4 o'clock. There's 13 exhibits for the draft development agreement. So it's unfortunate. I know the county staff is working as hard as they can. They're working in conjunction with both the applicant, the consultants. So, but for us to provide a sort of an informed response, it's a struggle when not everything is there. So I'm pointing at you because you've got your hand up.
Thank you, John. First of all, I want to say that I've been part of APAC probably for about 17 years now, and I'm extremely proud of the work that APAC has done on this particular project. I think you cannot understand the hours and hours and hours that people put into this. APAC brought the committee together, and we were fortunate that we had people like John Richards and Brooke and some of the other people who are extremely knowledgeable to add to this. Okay, so APAC should be really proud. You should be proud, John, of the leadership that you did with this. And as this project was going on, one of the things that I picked up at one of the meetings, they had said that the Planning Commission and people in the Planning Commission, they get expert opinion from the developers. The developers come in and they work with the Planning Commission. But yet the citizens of this county, we never get that kind of help. Okay, or
Planning department, not the planning commission.
well, from what I understand, that people, let's say from Parker, do go up and they do confer, and I've read other articles too, probably by you, that the Planning Commission, the people up in the county, have regular conversations and help from the developer. The people in this community, we don't get that kind of help. We come along now, and we're fortunate that we have experts now that could help us, okay? But I think maybe in the future, we ought to think of some kind of mechanism where the people in the county can be apprised by the developer and given some of this information before it comes out, so that we know what they're talking about, okay? The other thing I had said, John, at previous meetings was that we're getting so many projects coming into the Planning Commission. I said, how could they handle it? You know, and I think it was brought up to me, well, we bring in associates or we bring in people to help with this. I said, who pays for that?
The developer.
Well, the developer pays for it. Isn't that kind of a conflict of interest? I mean, right there, I'm just looking at some of these things.
The taxpayers can't pay for it. It's a development project. When you really look at the dynamics involved, the financial aspect, the developer has to pay for the work that he's asking to be performed. So
The county should be able to do all of this. And I realize that there's a problem with hiring people. Everybody in this country is having a problem with hiring people. Okay, it's not just our county. So that's just a couple of things that I wanted.
for small projects, I would agree with. This has been a long, drug out, very complex project with all kinds of nuances to it, right? So it's extremely difficult to try to stay up with that from a county planner perspective because they've got multiple things on their plate, which is why the county planning department is contracted with a few outside agencies that have that skill set where they can pretty much dedicate a person at least half-time, maybe full-time, to do the work that needs to be done. So the rest of the permit applications or building applications goes to the building department, but the plan submittals to get a building permit that planning has to look at can be conducted by the staff that's there. It's a case of demand and supply, right? We all know there's a building season that starts up in January and everybody starts submitting their building applications. And that's got to go through planning. They've got to look at it. So there's this huge surge every year of work that's outlined. And we're in the middle of it right now because it started basically probably February, March of this year. And what happens is our planning staff gets backlogged and behind because of the inundation of things, the only way they can accommodate those kind of surges is to go out for outside resources. Because you can't pay staff to sit there during that surge and then have to pay them for the period you don't have the work for them to do, right? You can't overstaff it to cover that surge period. So that's part of what's here. But the other philosophy they've taken on is for very large, complex projects. And probably the other one that's going to be coming up soon is Marble Valley, which has a lot of nuances to it as well. Those kinds of projects, they look to see if the developer is in agreement that they can go to an outside source who's a very qualified firm that has the capabilities to stay on that project and work it through in communications with our planning staff lead, whoever that is. In this case, for Central, it's Gina Hamilton. So she's been working very closely with Pat Angel. Pat Angel was the contracted individual for this to come in and do that extra work that our staff didn't have the capacity to do. But that's a normal practice in a lot of agencies. So with respect to the discussions with the citizens, that's really what APAC's purpose is, right? To invite the developers. And I know you've tried to get answers, but the question is, how much time can you take to do that in a normal meeting process? An hour, hour and a half? So, and a lot of this is going to take multiple hours if you're going to try to go into the depths of something like a specific plan that's 1,500 pages long.
Here, I first got involved with APAC, and it was a Dorado Pacific plan in 2015. I worked with John before he was elected supervisor. And one of the things in our first report we discovered was that the county planning had a list of about 7 or 8.
John, I'm having trouble hearing.
It's on.
Is that better?
County planning.
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
County planning has a list of about 7 or 8 approved outside consultants. The developer does not get a choice as to which outside consultant will be selected by planning staff.
Actually, they can request, but they don't get a choice in the
They
end,
don't
right?
get a choice.
But they can request, yeah.
They can request, but they don't.
Yeah.
They're not the ultimate decision. So
Right.
Summit County is making a decision as to which outside consultant, and that could be based on their knowledge of the area, how much work they've done in El Dorado County before, a number host of factors. So there is some independent process behind it. A lot of the things I've read on Nextdoor, that our planning department, our commissioners, our elected officials have been bought off by the developers. Quite frankly, I'm going to call it for what it is. It's bullshit. We have professional county planners. We do not have politicians that are in the pockets or getting paid off by developers. People put out that kind of stuff, and it's just, they're just venting and they're not thinking it through, and it's wrong. So, I'll say that for things. Now, I will tell you, when we talk about this project, having worked on the first 2 major APAC reports, it's a tremendous amount of hours, as has been said. And, this is just one project, and there's others that deserve and will get as much attention, but it can be overwhelming because we're all volunteers. At least I know a couple of the people who work on this are still working full time.
Tragically, yeah.
Tragically. And if, even if you're retired,
Fortunately, you got to pay the
I don't
bills.
want to do this 8 or 10 hours a day. So you give the time you can. One thing I really find, and I know we've complained about this before at the planning department, is when you go to when they post all the new documents, they keep renumbering the things. So the latest public comments or public letters now become number 1. So when you were looking at number 27, because that was a particular document that you were referring to in an email or looking up, they've added new comments. So that was number 27 is now number 33. They make it more difficult than it should be. We've spoken to them about this. I don't know what it takes. Does it take an act by the Board of Supervisors to get planning to fix it? But they just don't seem to get it. I mean, I'm looking at transparency. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for the citizens to access documents. And when they keep renumbering the documents, and I sent out an email to John Davey, I refer item number 27. He goes, looked at the next day, there's no item 27, it's something else. So, you know, it just makes it more difficult than it should be.
Agreed.
Hey, can I jump in?
Please do.
So I just wanted to address a couple of things that John, and Tim have said. One, I think in my experience anyway, in most counties and cities, the use of outside consultants to supplement staff in the planning department is just an accepted practice for the reasons that John Hydall mentioned. Having said that, though, the process is not as independent as you might think it is. There's a lot of interaction between the developers and those consultants and the developers and the planning department staff. And I think when you have a project that's dragged on for 10 years, you get a lot of collaboration between the planning department staff, the consultants, and the developer. It's just inevitable. There are relationships that are developed, you know, some might call it regulatory capture. And so I think that's what we're seeing on this project. And I think it's why, for example, the staff report appears to dismiss the concerns expressed by the community and take very seriously concerns expressed by the developer. And so, you know, and I guess it's even more troubling to hear that the planning department kind of relies on the developer for expertise. That's a very dangerous dynamic. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't use outside consultants, but it sure would be nice, and maybe I'm just being idealistic here, to have significant expertise within the planning department to where we're not relying on the developer to provide expertise. I think that's been a real problem with this project. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I would, I know that we mentioned in the report is that it's natural. I think it's part of the culture of the development. You know, we talk about this being a 10-year project. Is that you touch it all the time? Maybe not every day, but planning staff has access to the development team that that you and I don't, and also the development team has access to the planners that you and I don't. But we should hope that there's a good relationship there, because we want it to be well considered, and we want the planners to bring their expertise to bear as well. But yeah, I think it becomes sort of a unique dynamic, especially with this long. That's the only concern, you know. And I think we saw that represented in the staff report, basically that they are very dismissive of all the concerns that that we've raised in the past. And maybe it's justified, but we don't think it is. So, but also of other residents' concerns. So it does look, I don't want to say advocacy, but it looks like, their goal as the staff is to look at it and make sure it meets what the county needs. And, I don't know that our voice, they recognize this. I don't know that it's heard. I don't know that it's often considered to the degree that, we would want, but we're not working there doing the work. And, they have people above them telling them, we gotta get this done. So I think that's fair. And if there's a counter argument, go ahead. And I'd love to hear anybody. Oh, Alistair, you have a microphone in front of you? You're about to. Oh, yeah, okay. Green. Push it. Push it, and it should go green.
Well, you're touching on a lot of subjects here, and yes, I have a bit of experience in this. And my impression is that if a project is going on for 10 years, there's obviously a communication problem. And my question is really open, and probably to you, John. Is there any way sorry.
Yeah, it's the microphone's for our online people. It doesn't do the room.
Oh, you're good. Speak up a little bit more if you could, Alistair.
Yeah?
Yeah, you're good, as long as it's green.
I'll take this one, okay. The point is communication. And if a project goes for 10 years, isn't there some way that you can get into a room with people who, and I don't mean necessarily a public meeting because it can turn into a horrible bun fight, but the people who are genuinely interested, APAC, the developer, the planning commission, and just go through all the points that we have. I mean, I agree with John that, I don't know whether the planning commission knows everything. I don't know what is important to them, whether it's the last comment or whether it's a PhD dissertation further down the line. So it just seems horrible to me that we're being railroaded all the time. And so the question is, within the confines of the law that gives us these opportunities to review documents, and can't we have a discussion? Do we always have to submit things and then hope to pray that someone reads them? I don't know. That's the first question. Well, the second question is really about the outside consultants. Well, as it happens, Ken McDermott is a very good friend of mine. As my former boss in Coker Ewing, is a real stand-up guy. He's ethical and everything you would want from a consultant. And yes, he is employed as the person to, whatever it is, help process the, in this case, Marble Valley. When I spoke to him, I said, "Hey, Ken, what the heck are you doing over here? You're on Parker's website." And he threw a loop. He said, I can't be. And I said, well, sure enough, when I went back, he wasn't on there, but he is mentioned as a county contractor. Well, if he weren't such a great guy, and if we weren't so honest, I'd be very, very uncomfortable. Now, is it not if there was a person like Kent on this project, could he not be in here and talking? I mean, there's got to be better communication than having a 62-page epistle to a commission that may never read it, as well as all the other letters like mine. Anyway, those are the two things that and certainly we need to have can we ever talk to Parker? And I mean Parker, not Bone.
No, I know that.
Thank you very much.
I did see your letter get posted today, and I saw John's latest letter get posted today at 4 o'clock. I know that APAC did not speak to Toronto Associates in the first draft and the recirculated draft, and that they did come to us in 2019. So we were appreciative that they were willing to do that. And a lot of people have noted that really it wasn't a listening presentation, it was a presentation.
When was it that he?
It was in the end of 2019. I want to say it was like October, November, December, and they started having planning commission. So we did have them. We were at the CFC building. They came and talked to us, but it wasn't. Well, to be honest, yeah, it was
A presentation. It wasn't a deep discussion.
Yeah, it was a presentation.
The other thing, Alistair, I'm going to just tell you is that when you have groups that are significantly interested and involved that don't meet with the public eye, you get all of these accusations. They're off doing their own thing. They're making their deal. Why can't we as the citizens participate? And then you're talking about hundreds of people. And that's really the planning commission hearings. That's where everybody gets together and has an opportunity to go through that.
The planning commission is fantastic. But I just say there's somewhere between the planning commission and the developer, because as a developer, I asked to see a staff person or whatever. They were always available. They were very good. I talked, but obviously I gave them my view, right? The other side doesn't get the opportunity, but somewhere along the line, they have to.
So other area advisory committees, design review committee, so they've started meeting in, is it the board chambers, or they're meeting at the county instead of meeting like at the Cameron Park Fire Department and doing the Zoom on their own. And they have the support of county staff to facilitate the meetings. But those advisory committees are appointed by the Board of Supervisors, whereas APAC, we're strictly volunteer. So they have to strictly comply with the Brown Act. we try to comply with the Brown Act, but we have no Brown Act training. You know, we're sending each other emails as we're writing this thing. You know, if we were a Brown Act organization, we couldn't do that. So there are, as you're suggesting, there has to be a mechanism where,
Okay, there's
Yeah.
no mechanism, that's the point.
Oh, John, I'll kind of tag on that. This is a 10-year project, been submitted 2 or 3 times. Nothing's really changed based on the response from APAC. It's the same as it was last time. It's the same proposal as it was last time. So it feels to the citizenry that they'll just keep coming at it with the same proposal. There's no discussion on what are the 8 points that we could get past. Right? It just, and so now this time it's a total rezone and it's a total relook at the general plan to make the specific plan fit the revised general plan, because it's been turned down. It's been voted on by the citizens of Dorado Hills and turned down. It's 91% against, yet we take all this time. I've been on the calls with you and participated and learning. But to your point, Alistair, there's, on this project, if Parker still wants to keep coming at it with the same project after it's been turned down 3 times, I see all of this as a big waste of time. It's already been voted on. No, why are we still entertaining it?
and so the vote that you're referencing was an advisory vote. It, you know, wasn't binding, right?
Right.
It was a sense of the community to let the county understand, the applicant understand the community desire.
John, Supervisor Heidel. Yeah. Is there any way that the county could provide expert opinion to APAC? Could we get, in other words, could we be able to sit down with someone who is an expert where they would go over things? Because, you know, we've been doing this for a long time, and now I looked at this plan here and I said, boy, there are things that John brought up that I never thought of. Is there any way that we could get someone to sit down with APAC and give us some expert opinions? Someone who is, I'm going to say, is non-biased, to just give us the facts.
We would start with the planning department and probably Gina Hamilton as the lead planner and ask her to come down but do you want a presentation or do you want answers to in-depth questions?
There are many projects that come before APAC.
Yeah.
All of them are different. All of them have different features.
Yep.
None of us know enough about all these different features. We would like to have someone come down and give us some insight about the project. You should look at this, you should look at that. And this way would kind of it won't even out the field between what the developer does and the information that they give to the planning department, but at least it would give us some idea so that we could pass this on to the different communities that are working with APAC.
I think you'd end up with a high level answer like read the EIR and submit your comments, and because you have to get real specific. I think the difficulty with this project, it is a specific plan, okay? Which this community hasn't dealt with a specific plan for the most part since 1999, 2000, which is when all the specific plans for this area basically got passed through the Board of Supervisors. So it's unique from the standpoint, it isn't a normal project, it is a specific plan. And specific plans have a lot of latitude and variability built into them. And the benefit to the county is you get a development agreement that says you can ask for some community benefit as a result of that. So it opens up to a negotiation process. But not only is this a specific plan, it's a general plan amendment. It's 2 specific plans that are a new one that's being created and another one that's being transfer of property, basically open space transfer from one to the other. This has got as many complications to it as you could possibly envision in any kind of a process. And I think John Richards pointed out as well, to look at Pedregal combined with the west side part of this, the answer is they're trying to get maximum flexibility on density transfers and everything else. That's in their favor. That's what they're going to want to ask for. So for the county to say, no, you can't do that is not the right response. The county has to say, submit our plans and we'll go through the process and we'll prepare all the paperwork and ultimately go through the planning commission and into the Board of Supervisors. That's the process we kind of have. So you can get people to answer in-depth questions where you kind of started, but you really need to understand what are you looking for? Because there's so many different elements involved. You have to define what it is you want to dig into, because there's a lot of digging to do.
You know, I'm talking about other projects also that come before APAC,
Right.
Montano,
Right.
the apartment buildings
Right.
in town center. All of those projects had features that we on this board as volunteers really don't know. We don't know some of the exceptions that happen. You know, we'll look at it and say, oh, you can only build up to 40 feet, and then they'll come up with saying, oh, well, if you put 10 feet in the basement, it can be a 5-story building. Those are the kinds of things that I think we should have access to someone who's an expert who we can say, look at this plan. What do you think about it? Can they build higher than 50 feet? Can they put a tower like Montano wanted to? You know, those kinds of questions that we really don't know, we really can't understand. And we can't give it out to the community and work with the community if we don't understand.
So if I were in your shoes, what I would want to start with is an understanding about the unique features of a specific plan, because you get large lot maps, you don't get preliminary maps. You don't get to see very much in the detail. It's really a conceptual level proposal that gets worked to maximum allocations. And then when the developer comes forward with his mapping, he'll tell you, this is what we're really going to lay out now. But before that, you don't know the details of it. That's part of the inherent qualities of a specific plan. And I think that's pretty universal in every planning organization, whether it's Sacramento County or El Dorado County.
I'm not even talking about the specific plan. I'm talking, let's say, Montano.
Right?
Which is
That's a project.
Which is a small project, okay?
Right.
The building in town center is a small project. There were things about those projects that we really didn't understand. Okay, the height of the buildings. Can they have music? Okay, what are some of the rules and regulations about that? I think those kinds of things, if we had someone come in and talk to us and we could ask them those questions, we could lead the community into making a better analysis of a project. You know, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Parker with his.
Okay, if you're talking an individual project, yes, that's easy to get, I think, because some of it, for instance, the Town Center Apartments is run by an HOA, right? The Town Center Business Owners Association.
Design review committee.
Design Review Committee. So things like noise and odors and all that stuff are not controlled by the county in that particular application. They're basically, well, they can be at some level.
There's a high level of county, and then there's a very specific for the
Right. Because it's like being part of CCNRs in a residential community, right? They manage that part of it. So we, as the planning department can't tell you this is going to be the limitations on the noise. We have a county ordinance on noise, and they have to live within that, but it's going to be probably lower than that within the confines of that architecturally controlled business unit.
You know, when we look, and John, I'm not going to beat this to death.
Yes, you.
When we looked at town center, the apartments, we were under the impression that every apartment was relegated 2 parking spots. Okay, I was talking to a resident yesterday. He said, "Well, there could be 2 parking spots." In other words, they have not been given a predetermined spot. You don't have A and B for you. You go in, and if you're lucky, you get a spot. Okay, and this is not what we understood when we did the apartments.
But you're talking 2 things. One is the number of parking spaces per unit that has to be there. The other is how the management of that organization allocates those parking spaces.
Well,
Do they dedicate one
put-
parking space to a studio and 2 parking spaces to a 1-bedroom? And that's the management terms, right? But the county can only say, for this number of residents, this is the number of parking spaces you need to have.
But we always understood that a tenant was given 2 spots that were relegated just for them. In other words, they can come down and they can park in spot A and park B because they were told this, you know. So those are the things that I'm talking about that we don't understand, and that's why we need someone to come down who is an expert, and we could ask them those kinds of questions.
And I think where we struggle with that is that we heard one thing from the applicant, then when we look at the ordinance for parking, the county level, there were 2 different things. But the applicant did say, yeah, there's 2 spaces for every. And so Brooke's waiting with her hand up. I'm gonna go to Alistair because he's been waiting with his, well, not his hand up, but not even shaking a fist, but he had something to contribute.
My point was really that John brings up, which in my opinion is the problem. You have a general plan amendment, a specific plan, a
Rezone.
a lot, a rezone and all the other nice things, a large lot tentative, but in the submittal is a very, very specific tentative, large lot tentative, which frankly, in my book's a tentative map. Let's not get into those things. But the point is, I think that's where the problem was. What would have happened? Yes, spilt milk and looking backwards, but if it was the planning, the county would have just said, general plan amendment and specific plan. And then we will, that area is taken as a big blob, okay? In that particular case, my personal view is that the county should have brought it under the infill project. Now, an infill project that the planning department says, yes, it is well, it's not an objective. I think it's a lot more specific than that. But that would have changed the entire dynamics of what we were looking at. And Bone and everybody else has said, yes, it is an infill project. But if it's an infill project, it would have been treated differently. And it would have, the county has that policy, and that policy would have been developed over, what, 15, 8 years, how, God knows how long we need. So we've just got problems because we don't look at things, large projects, in that kind of light. Now, that may be a little different in an infill project. If you look at the other projects that are further out, yes, they're better off with specific plans. But this is an infill project, and that's the problem. So county policy, just do 2 things and not 8 as they have done. So it's a very, very bad situation.
Well, again, it started 10 years ago under a totally different set of supervisors and director of planning and building. And so, yeah, we can go through all the history, but there's a number of things that have happened over that 10-year period that have not brought everything to the point that people are satisfied they can get the information they want. And there's contradictory things within the documents that have been submitted, which is typical. Until you go through and identify what is the specific number here, what's the corrected number, I would hope our planning department had gone through and found all those things. They have not. So I don't know what that leads us to, other than I guess we don't have enough staff to do that in a timely manner, but whatever.
Now we're here in a
Can I,
different situation. I'll shut up. Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Brooke.
so John, you raised a really interesting point, and I thought it was one that goes to the heart of possibly something that the community members need a little bit more education on. And frankly, I couldn't find any guidance within the staff report, but this project is unique in that you do have an existing specific plan, and then you have a creation of a specific plan. And then typically the creation of the specific plan would be to have a localized rezone that wouldn't necessarily render a rezone in a specific area inconsistent with a general plan, and then have your general plan fall apart like what happened in the late 80s and early 90s here in El Dorado County. But then what's missing in the analysis is, what do you have when you have a rezone within a specific plan that's inconsistent with the other specific plan? And you don't get vertical and horizontal consistency, which is required. And that analysis wasn't done. And frankly, I can't find any legal authority for that type of project. And I think it begs the question, why was it missing? There was no consistency analysis done as to the existing El Dorado Hills specific plan. And so you raised that issue, and I fully agree that this is probably the most complicated development proposal I have ever seen. But I haven't witnessed or been part or privy to the county's position on that type of project and educating us on what is it that you guys are looking at and what's the basis of analysis.
Understand, and I've not heard that answer either, so good questions. I'm hoping our planning commission will raise some of those questions tomorrow. Because that, unfortunately, at this stage, that's where it has to happen, is at the planning commission hearing. So.
So I did want to, let's make this longer. We had a presentation at SUNY Council about plan developments. I thought it was rather informative, and I was glad to see, it's recorded, we were able to share that with everyone. And so I had reached out and asked, I think I mentioned to you, Supervisor, about, hey, let's do one on specific plans. However, I never did get a response to that. I know
okay.
staff is busy, and I think I asked twice, and I never did. The first response was, I'll get back to you, and then the second one, I did not get a response. So that's probably ill-timed right now. Maybe when we get towards the fall, it might be a better time to do that. And so when we talk about specific plans like Marble Valley, that is out by itself. Specific plans, the original intent was for areas that were sort of beyond what's developed. It's to incorporate those new areas and provide a structured plan for how, and provide flexibility to the applicant, the developer, for how they can build it over several years and meet market demands. So my concern about Marble Valley right now is that there was an NOP in 2012, and we have not seen a draft since then. So we're talking 10 years, and there's been no update to that. So, and we know that it's coming.
Well, I think, the problem with something, well, take Marble Valley, since you mentioned it, John. It's going to be a huge project. Yeah, it's going to be a huge project. 3,000 to 4,000 homes.
Minutes.
But the time for the most active response time is once a draft EIR. Now, we know the developer and county has probably been working on it for a year or two or more. They've got their consultants, they've got their experts, they're getting all their stuff together. But once we have an EIR, we're typically given, by law, 45 days to review it. And, the EIR on Central Colorado Pacific plan was what, this tall, a foot and a half of paper? Hard for volunteers to get through, hard for anyone to read the whole thing. We try to split it up, sort of the expert take an area and deal with it. Same thing with Marble Valley, that's going to come through. It may not be, it won't be as difficult as Central Colorado Pacific because you're not layering, it's not like an onion, you're going to peel through zoning and the general plan amendments, but it's still going to be difficult. But we only have 45 days. Typically, planning department has granted us another 15 days, maybe 60 days. But when you're reading 400, 500, 600 pages, an extra 15 days, it gives you a little breathing room, but not a lot. You still have to just get to it. So, that's part of the problem. The community doesn't really get involved or hear about it until it's already well along in the process.
So we have two people. So I'm going to go back to John Richard real fast, because I think your hand was up first. Robert, you'll be next. So John?
I know we're jumping around a lot here, but for John Heidel, I had a question. As I'm listening to all of this, I think a lot of good points are being made, and it's just a difficult process in general. But one question I have is, what can we do moving forward to have some of the interests of the community expressed a little bit better through the staff at the planning department? Because that, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the areas that just concerns me the most, is how dismissive we've seen the staff report with respect to legitimate concerns of the community. And I would rather see a staff report that informs the decision makers, that informs the planning commissioners and the board of supervisors of the pros and the cons of the project. And we clearly don't see that here. And I'm just thinking forward to projects like Marble Valley. There are going to be pros and cons. All these projects have pros and cons. And so it's troubling to me that we don't see that, and there seems to be no path of communication other than people like the APAC volunteers writing these long reports. Is there a way to address that, to have some reform internally at the planning department, or how do we move forward on that?
What I would suggest is you invite our new director of planning and building, Karen Garner, to be a guest speaker at one of the APAC meetings and to share with you what her plans are to change the processes within planning and building to address some of the things you're talking about. She's only been in this position for, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 6 months now. So she's still getting her feet wet, trying to understand. She has a great background in it. I talk to her monthly. I share with her my concerns and observations about what's going on in the planning department, what we can do better, where we're short of staffing and those types of things. But I think she would make a great guest speaker to explain to you, because to be perfectly honest, we've been going through about 3 years, the last 3 years of culture change, trying to change the culture that was there for 15 years within the planning department, that the previous planning director had a commitment that his only job was to get every project approved. So when you have staff that have been there for many, many years and have had that philosophy, the director wants us to get every project submitted approved, you end up with a kind of carryover of the way those plans are written, in my opinion, my humble opinion, that's all this is, that is not consistent with where's the balance, right? It's a little bit off balance. And that's not every project. Some of the projects are probably much smaller, much easier to do that with. When you have huge projects, it just takes a ton of time to dig in and find all those things. So, but I would suggest you invite Karen to come down. She's been in that seat now for a while to be able to share with you what her plans are, because I think this is an opportunity for lessons learned. And if we need to make policy changes on how we do specific plans or whatever it is, let's talk about it. I think she would be very open to that, because we're working now to a set of policies that, and for the most part, haven't been updated in a long time. And particularly when you get into things like types of zoning and what you allow in zoning, right? So I've had several proposals to her already that I think makes sense from the standpoint of how do you get affordable housing within certain types of projects. It ought to be a by right thing, as opposed to you have to go through special provisions to get away from the mixed use condition that normally a developer would have to apply for. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but Karen would be the voice that could tell you what her plans are, and I think would be very receptive to listening to APAC's comments.
She was very generous. I think her first week on the job, she showed up at an APAC meeting.
Yes.
Which we really
Yes,
appreciated.
she came and introduced herself, I think. So yeah.
So that will probably be another one on our list that we'll check off of, how we can get people, I think workshops about, like, when we talk about a specific plan, to explain to us. And once we have that sort of base knowledge, other than our experience of dealing with it, that it's something that's a recording people can watch and it's available to everyone. Robert's had his hand up forever. Robert, Mr. Williams, will you please?
Hey, John, thank you. We've been speaking now for the last over an hour now, talking about a process that I think it'd be fair to say is broken, and trying to figure out how to deal with this in the future. Right now, we still have a very active situation that will result one way or the other in consternation within this community. Tomorrow we go before the Planning Commission. That will obviously be followed by some kind of action by the Board of Supervisors. I can only hearken back just a few months prior to this, when the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission was reacting to a proposal to alter the Carson Creek Pacific Plan in order to accommodate the desires of Lennar Homes of California. At that point, the presentation was made to the Planning Commission. 3 of the 5 members of that commission voted against that proposal for reasons that, quite frankly, were a little weak in retrospect. But nevertheless, the commission did vote to say no to that development. Several weeks later, that same proposal was put before the full Board of Supervisors. Now, I might mention that of the 3 planning commissioners that voted no, none of them currently sit on the current Planning Commission. The 2 that voted to approve the plan to support Lennar, the developer, are currently still members of the Planning Commission. Whether or not they are still going to be consistent with their views on this proposal, we'll have to see tomorrow. But I think it's important to note that in August of last year, the Board of Supervisors voted to reverse the vote of the Planning Commission. And so I guess my big concern here is, even with the amount of outrage that we see from this community on this development, that eventually it'll go before the entire Board of Supervisors. And to what degree are we going to witness the same kind of outcome we did in August? And so I think this is a practical political issue we're dealing with right now. And it'd be nice to be able to correct the issues that led us to this point. And hopefully we can get the process better in terms of future situations. But right now we're talking about tomorrow. It's going to be a very long, heated political session that will be followed by yet another session. And I certainly hope that we can raise above the acrimony at these meetings and deliberate in a positive fashion. Because I sure don't want to see this process end up in the courts, much like we're seeing right now with the Carson Crossing or the Crossing Creek Pacific Plan litigation that is now before the Superior Court. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
A lot of people have expressed similar concerns, so it's important to remember a lot of people have a lot of opinions about this. We struggled to find something we can grab onto that we could see in a positive light, which is why we arrived at the result we did with our findings. So thank you, Robert. Well, it actually ended up going longer than I thought we were going to go, so I apologize right now. I'm going to jump into this. So we had basically the reports available for everyone to read on the website. On the website, if you open the actual document, all the links internally will go to all the exhibits and supporting documents. We had 18 areas of concern. I don't know that we need to belabor that tonight, but essentially that, we didn't think there was a lot of consistency with the general plan. We thought that they ignored some elements of identifying inconsistencies. There's just a litany of things that we had questions and concerns about. So we're hoping that what we've expressed is something that the planning commissioners have at least looked at and have applied some thought and some consideration to. So I move ahead. So we do not need to go for our executive summary. I just had it here in case we needed to do it. So if there are no more questions on this tonight, I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to present it to the public after we submitted the comments. I'm sure we'll be submitting more comments as the project goes forward in some fashion. So, and there'll be an opportunity for, oops, I see a hand going up. There'll be an opportunity for everyone to participate, not just APAC, but the community, and we welcome your participation. So Mike, you have your hand up. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can. Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Well, obviously, the IR for this project is woefully short of what it should be. It's flawed from page 1 to the end. Why is the county in such a rush to process this thing and get it approved? Why can't they send the developer back to the drawing board and tell them to fix all the flaws before they move forward?
Well, we expressed a dissatisfaction with the quality of the EIR, and the consultant, the applicant, and staff have said that their preference is for the planning commission to consider the EIR, the final, and validate it, to approve it. So they believe they've done their work. So best we can do as a community is provide our feedback that we think it is deficient, and then hope that they're looking at some of our concerns. And perhaps there are concerns that we've raised that they can, I hate saying it, but that they can address and maybe get a positive result out of. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is to have a positive result. And I know, and I'll quote one of the members of the applicant's development team, Kirk Bone, has said in the past, he does not like negotiating at the podium. And I agree with that in a sense that when you do that, you sort of block out the community input. Because now you're changing the project when you're before the decision makers, there's no opportunity for the community to say, hey, that's great. Can you do this much more or do this much less? Or can you modify it in some other way? So,
Well, the county's demonstrated an obvious process of turning off all community import. They're ignoring us completely.
I will say there were a lot of comments. And I would say there are thousands of comments. In fact, today, considering they reposted our comments again, there's another 300 pages going in at 4 o'clock. So how a planning commissioner can review that, I don't know. I know that I was talking to planning commissioners this morning, and they're trying. I know that they're making every effort to see what's in front of them. And they're also asking us, is there anything else you want to contribute? So we've done that. I'll probably make some public comments via Zoom tomorrow if I can push my boss off for a little while. I mean, I know other members of the community and from APAC will probably likely either be there in person or contributing as well. So,
Okay, well, I also wanted to thank everybody in APAC for all the work they've done on this. You guys have been a community leader and for a long time. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that. So this is my opportunity to thank people that have worked on this. I think I identified when we started, John Richard, obviously our subcommittee chair, and Nancy has worked on this for both sessions. Brooke has worked on this. We had some new people working on this as well this time. Alistair was invaluable in providing a lot of assistance to us. We had the benefit of having 2 developers on our subcommittee looking at this, and technically a lawyer or 2 floating around as well. So I want to thank them for doing that. And this is our opportunity to remind people, how do you become a voting member of APAC? This is how. So for Melinda, I can see you back there, Linda Peak, John Burns, Alistair, Robert Williams, you all have done all this work. If you're inclined to be a voting member of APAC, that option is open to you now. We can discuss that next month. If you want to accept that, we would appreciate the help that you provided and would like to consider that you'd be providing additional help in the future. Because I think our existing board has been in place for a while. It'd be great if some other people wanted to jump in and, do some steering, some driving for a while. But this is how we get people involved and how you become a member of our voting block that approves or disapproves sort of the review work that we do. So, Alistair, Melinda, John, I think is on here, John Burns, Robert Williams here. Thank you. And then of course the existing APAC members I want to thank as well. It is a lot of work. And my goal in the future is that it won't be as much work, that it's, we're all taking small pieces, the projects are more manageable. So that's there with that. So if you want to provide public comments to our meetings, we provide an option. When we issue our agenda, if you provide written or email comments to edhapaccomment@gmail.com. If your comment comes in by Monday before our Wednesday meeting, we'll get those into the meeting and see if we can provide some answers or at least pass along the questions. So unless there's anything we're going back to tonight.
Don't look at me, John.
I'm trying hard. Our next meeting is July 13th. Right now, I don't know what will be at that meeting. There aren't a lot of new updates with projects. There'll probably be a result with this, and there'll probably be something either to the Board of Supervisors or something. If it's simple and we wanted to consider a virtual Zoom meeting, we'll do that. But otherwise, we'll be here at the fire station again with a Zoom component. So again, I want to thank everyone for their work. The community aspect of this is so important for how things get developed and how we provide that feedback to project applicants who we want them to have a good project and to have their benefit, but we also want the community to benefit as well. So with that.
So John, I have a question relative to Marble Valley and Lime Rock. Is APAC going to be as involved in reviewing those specific plan applications as they have with Central? Because it's kind of outside the boundary of what's normally considered APAC's planning area. And there is a Cameron Park Design Review Committee.
Yes.
So I'm not, you need to talk to them and make sure they don't feel like APAC is trying to impose upon their community, because there's There's some pretty strong-willed people up there now, and
Um,
they might not appreciate the engagement unless it's done in a cooperative manner,
Oh, it
collaborative
will be
manner.
cooperative, and I've gone to Cameron Park Design Review Committee.
Excellent. Okay, so you've already had that
Attended in person and
discussion.
virtually. They're down members right now. But whenever they have a meeting and it's agendized, we share it on the APAC website as well. The same with any other advisory committee, whether it's Diamond Springs, El Dorado. We just put a note and say, here's their meeting agenda, here's when they're meeting, here's the document links, go support your community. We want to provide that support to other advisory committees in the area, whether appointed by the board or whether like a true volunteer. You know, Lotus, Coloma, Pool, Pilot Hill, Diamond Springs, El Dorado, all of them. So we try to advocate for all sorts of community input and participation. So
Excellent.
we will. I will talk to them. Somebody else will. Maybe John.
We ain't as scared.
Well, no. If it's an opportunity for somebody else to do some heavy lifting.
Exactly, but I think it's
That's
outside of 95762, so the question
All
will
of
come
it
up,
or
well, what are
parts
your
of it?
boundaries? How far do you go?
Yes.
Just anticipate the question, right?
Yes.
Marble Valley, 100%.
Parts of it are in the fire department.
Absolutely.
Parts of it. So some of those residents, their address is El Dorado Hills, 95762, but a lot of it, especially the Lime Rock Valley stuff, is Cameron Park. So it's dynamic. So, but hopefully it'll be less contentious and easier. And but again, I just want to thank everybody for their help, and let's go home. So see everybody in July in some fashion. Thank you.